Ladies and gentlemen, welcome into my official college football week number one top 10 best bets, where I go through my 10 favorite bets for this first week. And beginning with number one, I am going to be taking Georgia minus the 13.5 versus Clemson. Georgia, to me, is just better than Clemson at basically everything. Clemson's got a very good defense. Georgia's got a better one. Georgia's got a way better offense, way more explosive. And guys, it feels like a game like this in Atlanta, Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Georgia's going to have more of a home field advantage. I could see Clemson keeping it close early. Maybe it's lower scoring, 10-3, 10-7, something like that. But Georgia very likely will pull away. Kind of reminds me of that week one game from a few years ago, Georgia against Oregon. Although there should be more Clemson fans because it's closer, South Carolina to Atlanta, than Eugene is. But still, it's just like Clemson, their offense and how bad it's been the past few years going up against that Georgia defense. It seems like a mismatch. And it seems like even if it's like 27-10, 34-14, somewhere in that range, Georgia easily covers. They are the number one team in college football. Again, just way more talented, especially on offense. Clemson does have a very good defense. I'll be honest, they do. And I like Clemson. I have them in the playoff. But this week one game, it's not a good matchup. It's a de facto home game for Georgia. They're used to playing at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They normally play there, the SEC Championship, these other neutral site games in week one. I think Georgia covers that 13.5 point spread, which has been bet down from 14, by the way. Moving on to number two, it is Vanderbilt, believe it or not, plus the 13 versus Virginia Tech. So Virginia Tech, one of those teams that really has not been very good, but they're getting all this hype, and I am guilty of giving them some hype as well, because Virginia Tech, they've got an interesting returning dual threat QB. Apparently, some teams were offering him money in the portal. He didn't take it. Virginia Tech's got a relatively easy schedule, but Vanderbilt recently has been better than people think. And I think Vandy is able to keep this close. I'm not kidding. I'm being serious. I think Vandy covers this 13-point spread. They're at home. They've got the brand new stadium that, behind both of the end zones. I believe they're done with construction there. So I like Vanderbilt. Virginia Tech is your prototypical. They get the preseason hype. They really don't deserve it. It's more of they've got an easy schedule, kind of similar to Nebraska with what people are doing right now with the Big Ten and Nebraska's easy schedule. And people are saying, well, Nebraska, they might be a dark horse for the playoff. It's the same thing with Virginia Tech. They've got an easy schedule. Vanderbilt is at home. Virginia Tech, probably a closer game. I would expect Virginia Tech to win it. But Vandy, they've been better recently. People think they're always the worst team in FBS. It's just not true. I remember last year they annihilated Hawaii. Obviously, Virginia Tech is better than Hawaii, but I will take Vandy to cover that 13-point spread. Number three, it is Ohio State minus the 49.5. This is, I wanted to not do this, but it's just so tempting. Ohio State, with how talented they are, this is a tough one, I'll admit, because we know what's going to happen. Ohio State will likely be up 42-0, maybe 38-0 at half. And then you're going to have to rely on backups. But Ohio State, I think, with Will Howard, they're going to want to get him 3-4 touchdown passes in that first half. They've also got some backup QBs they're probably going to want to play. Devin Brown, Sayin, maybe Aaron Nolan as well. They want to get them some experience throwing especially. So I think they're going to be throwing in the second half because they want to get those kids some time. They're not going to try and run it up on Akron, but this is one of those games where if you get to where it's like 49-7 or 49-3 late in the third quarter, it's basically a lock Ohio State is going to cover because even their backups are just so much better than Akron, who's one of the worst teams in FBS. This just comes down to, do you think Ohio State's scoring 56, 63 points? If they are, they're going to cover this game easily. I can't see Akron scoring more than 7. I remember Ohio State back in like 2016 had a very similar week one type game against Bowling Green, who's just another horrible MAC team. They won 77-10. So it wouldn't surprise me if Ohio State gets into the 60s, maybe even the 70s against a team like Akron. 49.5 is a huge number, don't get me wrong. And you do have the unfortunate, 52-3. Ohio State doesn't cover in that scenario, but I think Ohio State will probably score more than 52, although this is one of those games where you're kind of relying on backups, so it is a little bit annoying, but I will take Ohio State to cover that 49.5-point spread. Number 4, it is Colorado State plus the 32.5 at Texas. So Colorado State, they're better than people think. They really are. They've got a young quarterback. Remember them last year. They didn't have a great season, but they played really well at Colorado. Texas is a team. They're dealing with running back injuries. They lost some receivers to the draft. I think that Texas wins this game easily, but it's also important to understand with how hot it is there, the heat index, it's going to be 95, 100 degrees. Texas is just going to want to get out of there with a win. I could see this being like a 49-21 game. In that case scenario, I do believe that Colorado State will cover the 32 and a half. This line was like 35 and a half. It's been bet down significantly, so it's not great value, but I do think Colorado State, they're going to score points. As long as they get like 17, 20 points, they easily cover, in my opinion, at Texas. And Texas has had trouble with teams like this in the past. I remember they had a game against Wyoming. I don't know if it was like 2 years ago, where it was like a 14-point game late in the fourth quarter. So I think Colorado State 32 and a half is a big, big number. I think Colorado State's able to cover that. Next, we do have UNLV traveling to Houston. This is the only over-under I'm doing this week. I'm going with the over 54 and a half UNLV at Houston. Both of these teams very, very we would expect this game to be extremely competitive. I think Houston's like 1.5-point favorites. When you're talking about going over a number in college football, you want the game to be competitive and you want explosive offenses with bad defenses. When you look at UNLV, they do have a very explosive offense. Last year, they were in a good bowl game. I think they won 10 games. Houston, I would expect to be able to score. UNLV does not have that good of a defense either. So when you're talking about 54 and a half, that is not a hard number to reach, especially considering it is college and not the NFL. So you could be looking at like a 35-32. That gets easily into the high 60s. And you get the over 54 and a half. It's not anything crazy. So I do, and by the way, I've seen analytical models that do really find value in the over in this game. And then, by the way, another game I saw, Boise State and Georgia Southern, the over, I think 56 and a half. Great value in that. That's not on my top 10 best bets, but I'm just saying. Number 6, Arizona minus the 31 and a half versus New Mexico. This is a typical game where people are like, man, New Mexico played so well in the week 0 game against Montana State. They nearly won. They were 11-point underdogs. I think they're going to get throttled by Arizona. Arizona's got a young, talented team. Yes, they're replacing their head coach, but they've got a superstar receiver. They've got a young, good quarterback in Noah Fafita. They're going to easily cover this 31.5-point spread. They could score 60. I just think Arizona, this is a game with a young offense. They're going to have some fun. They're going to run it up a little bit, and they're going to annihilate New Mexico. New Mexico is still a bad team. I know they did perform well technically against the FCS team, Montana State, but they still blew it late. So give me Arizona. I think people might overreact to that week 0 game, New Mexico playing well. Zona will demolish New Mexico, and that's another analytical thing. Moving on to number 7, it is UCF minus the 37.5 versus New Hampshire. So I have noticed this more this year where they are giving out lines for FCS versus FBS games. I saw the Iowa line minus 22.5 versus Illinois State. But UCF just throttles teams like this. I'm telling you, they're probably going to score over 60 points in this game. And this is just one of those where technically, based off of the models, Vegas is coming up with a number of 37.5 for UCF facing an FCS team. But New Hampshire was horrible last year, especially on defense, even in FCS. So I think UCF easily wins this game. And it's like 59-0. I think that's an easy cover. They just can't make the line in the 40s because UCF technically didn't have a good year last year, but UCF, I do like their football program. I'm not gonna lie. I think they cover the 37.5 easily. Moving on to number 8, it is LSU minus the 4 versus USC. So this one, it depends. With these Sunday night games, because every year college football does this in week 1 where they'll have a Sunday night game. We've seen some blowouts more recently. And I think LSU could pull away from USC. It wouldn't surprise me if it's a higher scoring game, maybe tied at 24. LSU ends up winning 45-31, something like that. I think I have it at 42-35 as my final. So 4 is kind of a tough number. You would love to get it at 3 in case LSU wins on a field goal. You at least get a push. But this line originally was 6.5. So it's been bet down significantly. And it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I think USC, there was good value on them plus the 6.5. But just in this scenario, LSU, to me, when you look at these two teams, it's very clear that LSU is investing a ton into their football program. They definitely are. I mean, this is a very hard game to predict just because they lose a lot and they're breaking in a new QB, new receivers, everything, but they should have a lot more of talent on defense. USC, on the other hand, they are investing into their football program as well. They are always going to have a good offense with Lincoln Riley. But to me, there's some doubt with USC and Lincoln Riley possibly going to the NFL after this year if they go 8-4. They're in the Big Ten. It's going to be a lot tougher of a league. Give me LSU. They need to have a really good year this year. I think Brian Kelly, they get it done. They cover. They might only win by 7, but they do cover the -4 there. I do have Georgia State plus the 21.5 at Georgia Tech. This is an overreaction game. This is a letdown game for Georgia Tech. Coming back home after being in Ireland. Georgia State, not a bad football team. They're really not bad. They cover this 21.5 point spread. I don't think they beat Georgia Tech, but everyone is loving Georgia Tech because it was the only big week 0 game and they pulled the upset off on FSU. We get it. But I'm going to, zig when everyone else zags and say that, Georgia State, this is a game where, again, they're going to have a letdown game. They're probably going to win, but they're coming off traveling. It's going to be hard for them. And also, this is just everyone, the media hyping them up. That's their Super Bowl, week 0 win overseas, crazy atmosphere. You come back home to face a bad team like Georgia State. You think it's going to be an easy win, and they keep it close. And the line is also ballooned to 21.5 because they beat FSU as well. So you get good value on Georgia State. And then number 10, and again, this is just a correction game. It is Florida State minus the 17. This game happening on Monday. So Florida State, a little bit more time to get back and adjust from being in Ireland with the game being on Monday and not Saturday, 2 more days. And I just think Boston College is not good. Florida State originally was minus 21. Obviously, they lost to Georgia Tech, so it's gone down to minus 17. I'm not going to sit here and overreact. I think Florida State coming back home, they know they still have a chance at the playoff now. You can lose multiple games and still make it. They're going to win. They're going to be galvanized. And I think it's going to be like 38 to 17, something like that. That's an easy 21-point win and a cover of the 17-point spread. But either way, guys, it is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.